The families of victims are hoping for major changes this morning after the Department of Justice released findings from its investigation into police response to the Uvalde mass shooting. Attorney General Merrick Garland said improper training or no training at all, of course, impacted police response in the Robb Elementary shooting in May of 2022. It took nearly 400 officers at that scene 77 minutes before confronting the shooter who was inside the school with all of those students and teachers. Garland says law enforcement officers treated that shooting as a barricaded suspect instead of as an active shooter. Now, as we mentioned, the report is 600 pages long, so we wanted some help going over some of the findings. That's why we're talking this morning to retired Secret Service agent and M6 CEO Mike Matranga. Good morning. Thank you so much for talking with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here with you.
Yeah, I mean, so I appreciate you. Have you had a chance? I mean, this is a very large report. We know there was a news conference yesterday. Do you have a copy of the report, or have you been able to go through these, or were you just sort of following along as the AG was sort of going through their findings?
Yes, I do have a copy of the report, and I was able to review that yesterday in great length and have several discussions with multiple people in the industry. So yes, I do have a copy and have read it extensively.
What's your biggest takeaway from the DOJ's investigation?
You know, I think that the biggest takeaway for me is that, we're approaching 25 years after Columbine. We're now 6 years after Santa Fe, an incident that was just as equal of a tragedy. And there's been, since Columbine, since Santa Fe, since Parkland, since Sandy Hook, we've come out with best practices. Yet it seems like every single one of these scenarios that we're facing in the United States, the end result is always the same. Mm-hmm. And, we've passed legislation, we've given best practices and guidelines for law enforcement. And I think that it's time that we have a serious conversation about who's qualified to handle these situations. And, I've said for some time now that just because you're a police officer, you've been promoted to a police chief within a rural area of the United States, that doesn't qualify you to be able to handle these particular types of scenarios at this level of magnitude. Mm-hmm. And so I think that the takeaway from the report was that we have to start really digging deep and identifying who's qualified and promoting the right people and knowing their qualifications. That's one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, and when we talk about that, I know that the day before the report came out, a lot of the family members of children who died in that shooting said that they were hoping that there would be some recommendation for charges against some of the officers that failed to take action. I don't know your thoughts on that, but it's, and I don't know if that would make the situation better, right?
Well, I mean, being a former law enforcement officer myself, you never want to encourage criminal charges against officers or individuals who've taken an oath to protect and defend, preserve life. But in this particular case, and in many others, when you have a catastrophic failure of leadership that has, what I believe, has led to the more advanced or caused a higher risk of loss of life due to their inaction, their lack of courage, or simply an embellishment, possibly of their resume, which was shown in the actions or lack of actions on in May of 2022. In this particular incident, there needs to be someone held accountable. I do support, in this particular case, some of these individuals who were put in positions to make these decisions to be, civilly at a minimum, if not criminally held responsible for their lack of actions.
Does the report speak to any of that at all, about any recommendations when it comes to any sort of charges against anybody?
I did not see that specifically in the report, but in typical, government fashion, it's a 600-page report. It's almost like death by PowerPoint, and a lot of the jargon within the report is so complex that, you know, the layperson, the average superintendent or school board member would almost need an individual like myself to decipher this information within this report.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And I think, you know, when we talk about trying to get to the bottom of these school shootings, how police respond, preventing them to begin with, I mean, it seems like it's all about accountability, but sort of where does that start? I mean, does it start at the very top? Does it start with resources and funding to do these things in schools, or, you know, putting it on the backs of teachers who are trying to just teach in a classroom, and then now they're told you're responsible for so many other things?
well, you know, there's so many things that we could talk about of the reasons why these things continue to happen. You know, one of the things in particular is you talk about accountability. I would like to draw the attention to the lack of accountability regarding the Santa Fe incident. I mean, we're approaching 6 years. There's been no prosecution. The level of communication from those in positions of authority has completely come to a halt. Those individuals who are survivors or victims, whichever they choose to be called, and those individuals who have lost their children in Santa Fe have no answers. And I would call on the Department of Justice and the governor's office to, you know, I would ask them, where is our independent review? Right. Regardless of prosecution or not, we can determine facts and what went wrong that day as far as response. Yeah. It doesn't have to do anything, have to have anything to do with the shooter. But, you know, at the end of the day, what we have in the United States and here in the state of Texas is we have incidents that happen. We continue to have an atmosphere or a belief amongst a lot of people that these particular things are not going to happen in their community, that they're immune to them. And we are growing, or we are living in an ever-growing violent society. And these things absolutely can happen. And what I would tell superintendents and school boards is don't get distracted by the bright, shiny lights. The K-12 security space is not regulated. It doesn't matter what conference I go to. There are people selling products and unproven philosophies. And we need to stick to the basics.
And so you know a little bit about that, and I don't want to cut you off, but I want you to be able to tell us what M6 does. That's your company. You're the CEO. How your company helps with school safety. That's why you're at these conferences.
Right. So, you know, I'm the CEO and owner of M6 Global. You know, after the Santa Fe shooting, I came to Texas City ISD, and we led Texas City to #1 ranked security program in the state for schools. We are a consulting group with 30 consultants in 16 states. All of us are battle proven and tested, which makes that makes a difference. And we go into school districts and other verticals like in industries and critical infrastructure. We identify risk and vulnerabilities. We put together a strategic plan, starting with the people, identifying the people. Are they qualified? What do they need to be qualified? Let's train them to a certain standard so that the impact that they have not just solely resides within their area of responsibility at their job, but also can resonate and be carried on over into their communities as a force multiplier. And so we put together a strategic plan from beginning to end, whether it be people, personnel, policies, emergency operations planning from beginning to end. And then we also integrate technology as a force multiplier to that plan and maintain that for our clients.
All right. We want people to be able to learn more about school safety, school security, to hear from someone like yourself with this background and expertise. So we're going to put links on our website on click2houston.com to this interview and to your website as well. Mike, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.